Hey, what's going on, my favorite people? Welcome back to the Yuli Tudor Show, where I deliver to you marketing, branding, and personal development tips. And lately, I've been really immersed into the topic of branding because I realize just how powerful it is. It's really a part of our culture, it's a part of our identity, it's a part of our personality, it's a part of our social structures and how we interact with people and how people perceive each other. So I got inspired to do this topic because recently I converted to the iPhone XR, and there's something really interesting about how they packaged the iPhone box. And what it really came down to was the user experience. And these touch points, whenever your customer, your client comes in interaction with your brand, it has to be consistent with the brand promise, right? And it was just beautiful the way that I opened up the box and everything just kind of unfolded by itself. And when I opened it, I wish I almost had the box with me to demonstrate. But it was very clean. It was very simple to understand. The user experience is extremely important. So I wanted to talk today about branding and the foundations, because I think the problem is that a lot of people, when they start a business, they rush to market it, they rush to the sales, and you know what? That might last. It might work in the short time, but it's not really going to create the impact that you want. Because if you think about it this way, why is it that when you see like a symbol, right, the McDonald's symbol, we automatically think McDonald's, right? And all it is just like an M out of like French fries. And they've done such a great job in conditioning us to elicit those emotions within us, right? And that's really good branding, because the moment you see that symbol, you automatically think of a company. So we have to create a brand persona, a personality, and the only way to do that is to first start with the foundations. So I'm just gonna start welcoming you guys on here. Sherry, good to hear from you. Renata, Gisep, good to hear from you. Ronnie, good morning. It's afternoon here in Vancouver. Awesome. So before I talk about like the brand benefits and what does it mean to really have a brand, what is a brand promise, I want to first start off by understanding why branding is important. And branding, what it does is it builds customer loyalty, it increases value, it allows for higher prices to happen, it builds the market share, and it's much easier to launch a new product. So with my client earlier this week, I was talking about a concept, and I want you to be engaging with me. If I were to have a box of chocolates, and let's say they are, from Germany, they're European chocolates, they're, high quality. And what I do is I take this box of chocolates and I wrap it in newspaper, right? And I'm just wondering, how much would you actually pay for this box of chocolates, right? Drop a comment down below, engage with me. If you had no idea what brand this was, you had no idea what was in the box, and all you saw was a box wrapped up in newspaper, and maybe it had a label that said chocolate, like a dozen chocolates. Would you pay maybe like $10, $15, maybe even as high as $20? I want you to really think about this, right? Because packaging and branding literally determines the value of your product, right? So imagine I take this same box of chocolates, and now this time, hi Erin, good to see you. I wrap the same box of chocolates, but in a gold foil, right? And I take this red velvet ribbon, and you see this royal purple color, and it says, I don't know, Purdy's chocolates or something like that. Or let's make up a name. I don't know, Sweetness or something. I don't know. I'm not being creative right now with titles, but it's the title of the name of the chocolates, and it says like made in Germany, custom made, right? Would you pay $100 for this type of chocolate if it looked royal, if it looked prestigious? You know, would you use this chocolate to as a gift for one of your high-end clients? You see, and inside this box of chocolate, you literally have the same type of chocolate. So the branding of your product literally determines its value and its pricing. And of course, once they actually take a bite of that chocolate, it actually has to match the promise that it's delivering, right? So the promise in this case, it's high-end, custom-made chocolate, right? So it's very important that you understand the value of branding, because that's literally going to set yourself up for the next couple of decades, right? So you want to ask yourself, well, where do you see your brand and your company go from, 10, 20, 30 years from now, right? How do we build something that's absolutely timeless? How do we build something that, and what do I mean by timeless? Something that can adapt to the future economy, something that can be cross-cultural, something that could be across generational, right? So it is very, very important that you, before you build your business plan, you start with developing your brand identity, okay? So basically, what are the 4 keys to building a successful brand? 1, it has to be authentic, right? So you have to be very clear of what your core values are, what you stand for. And if you think about it, think about a brand as literally as a person. It has a personality, it has an image, it has an identity, and it has a character. So in order to build trust with people, you have to be authentic. You have to be clear of your purpose, so that when you interact with people, they know what you stand for, right? Your promise, right? It has to be relevant to the consumer. That's point number 2. So number 1 is being authentic. Number 2 is it has to be relevant to consumers. So what do I mean by that? We have to deliver a promise that covers something that's really important to the ideal market. Maybe there's a problem out there that other companies are not delivering quite well, and you are able to overcome this problem, and you have a promise that is very important and dear to this person's heart. So if you can think about, let me think of something. Let's say this brand of chocolates. Right now we are, nowadays people are very eco-friendly, right? So if this brand was to become timeless, then its wrapping would be recyclable. The chocolates are made in an environment that doesn't harm animals. If it's using milk for its chocolates, then the animals are being really well taken care of and fed organic whole grain type of food, right? So it's important that we accommodate to the times, right? So you have to ask yourself, well, what's important to the consumer? Well, the reality is that nowadays people will actually pay more for a brand that is mission driven, so that if it has something to do with saving the environment or humanitarian cause or giving back and somehow adding some value to society, people will actually justify paying more for that, because people want to be a positive contribution to society. That's one of the basic components of a human need. So we have to make our brand relevant to what's important to our ideal market. Now we also have to be consistent. So that's point number 3. And what do I mean by that is that every time that your brand interacts with the customer, the client, or lead, a prospect, whatever the case may be, your brand has to be communicated consistently. And that's why every single company needs what is called a brand standard guide. And a brand standard guide has the core value, has the promise, even comes down to what type of typography, what type of colors, what type of imagery. Are you using illustrations or are you using photos? What type of slogans, right? So that every time your customer or someone that's interested in your brand comes in contact, which is called a touch point with your brand, it is always consistent. So that's why it's also important to not only do external branding, which is the interaction with the potential client, but also internal branding in your organization. That's why when you've worked for a corporation, there's usually a period of 1 to 2 weeks of training so that they can teach you on their core values, so that when you communicate with a client, you are consistent in how they represent themselves. Okay, so it goes a lot deeper. Now, the fourth point is that you must be committed. You must be absolutely committed to keeping the brand promise, right? All employees have to support the brand, and they have to also continue to invest in it, right? So you yourself need to lead by example by investing in your brand and being committed to building the best brand that there is for your company. And when you instill that pride in yourself, when you hire a team, an organization, people will feel that confidence. You got to think about a brand like why do people go for a BMW i8 versus a Toyota? If you think about it structurally, they're both just as efficient when it comes to fuel and just efficiency, right, on a technical level, right? But people feel this pride of representing this brand, right? And why do they feel that pride? Because the owners have invested multi-millions of dollars in the brand. They are committed to quality and prestige and luxury, right? So when you instill that confidence and commitment to your brand, then your customers and your employees will also reflect that commitment. So that's also how you have customer retention and a lower turnover rate for employees. And I actually, if you're interested, there's a link that I can share with you where you can actually calculate the amount of dollars that you invest in your brand. What can it actually translate to in terms into ROI? And it's actually a variety of research articles from all over the world compiled into this algorithm. So you can say, okay, if I were to invest $100,000 to my brand, how many employees are going to be motivated? How much are my sales going to increase? How much customer loyalty am I going to have? How easy is it going to be for me to launch a new product, right? So you can actually calculate this, you can quantify this through a statistical analysis that's been done worldwide. So there's a very important reason why the top brands around the world invest so heavily in this, because the beautiful thing about this branding, unlike marketing, if you do this right once, you don't really have to keep reinventing it, right? So you have to think about it like this is your one chance to really make a positive impression, right? Especially now that we're so connected on an international level through social media. So now that I've talked about the four, key points to building a successful brand, one thing I want to talk about is, how to, give me a second. Let's talk about the branding process. So there's about 5 steps here. So how do you start, right? Well, first you have to define the brand. So earlier in this live, I was talking about, well, what is the promise, right? And what are the core values that stand behind it? So you got to think of your values as if it's the DNA of the brand, and the promise is the expression of that gene, right? So it has to be relevant to the overall business plan, and you also have to take a look at what exists in the marketplace and how can you stand out? How can you have a promise that's different? So, for example, when I ran my property maintenance business, I realized that there was a lot of kind of like regular people in neighborhoods that would, have their own cleaning businesses, but they weren't professional. They didn't have a uniform. They didn't have a logo. Sometimes they didn't even have insurance. They didn't hire skilled laborers that had experience for a long time. Usually it was just a regular Joe guy that would, hop on the roof and do some cleaning, and there wasn't any professionality around it. So how did I stand out from that? Well, I had brand new equipment, I had insurance, all my employees had to go through a 2-week training process, everybody was in uniforms, we were insured, we were really by the book, we were efficient, on time, right? So my brand promise is professionality and efficiency and getting the job done right, for a high quality level, right? Almost at a corporate level for the price of a regular Joe type of a business, right? So you have to think about what is your brand's promise, what are the core values, and how do you express that? So brands don't exist in isolation, okay? We have to think of a brand as if it exists in a home, and we have to build the components and the foundation of that home, okay? Now that we have determined what our brand promise is, okay, so in this case it'd be professionality, efficiency, timeliness, so that's our brand promise. Now we're going to position that brand, Okay, so basically when we're doing positioning, what we're doing is we're shaping how the customer thinks and feels about the brand, right? So you have to identify the customers, find out what kind of benefits they're seeking, and what do they usually believe about these kind of products or services, right? So in the instance of, let's use a cleaning company. Let's say we're dealing with a retired couple. Maybe that's my target market. It's elderly people. They're retired. They're at home, but they don't have the physical strength to do the house maintenance, right? So what benefits do they seek? They're seeking for somebody else to take care of that work for them and get it done as if it was their own home. Now, what do they believe about this industry? Is that, people cut corners. People are not as efficient. People are sloppy. They're not wearing in uniforms. It's just kind of like the regular Joe in the neighborhood that's delivering this business, right? So they might not have the best perception about it, but they do expect a good price, right? Because there's so many people in the cleaning industry, right? So how do we stand out? Well, that's when your brand promise comes into place, is we deliver efficient service. Now, you could even go above and beyond because people now are more eco-friendly. How do you stand out? What is your cutting edge? You can say, hey, my cleaning products are top of the line, and they're organic, and they're pet friendly and child friendly, and they're not toxic to your plants and to the people in your home, right? So that's another part of your brand value, and that becomes your brand identity ultimately. So now that we've decided what our promise is, how we're going to position it in comparison to competition, then comes the stage of expressing the brand. So any brand, just like a person, it needs a name, a personality, an identity, so that people can build that trust and understand what you represent. So this involves the logo, but it's more than just a logo. It's more than just a website. It's building the entire feel and perception of the brand. And 5 minutes? Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this up. I gotta go because we have some exciting plans later on this afternoon. We're gonna have some guests here in the patio. So the next thing is, how do you express it? So you need to build what's called a brand standards guide so that it's consistent in how you express it on social media, on your website, and your banners and trade shows. You need to have a feel, and it really it comes down to a science. So if you want to know how to build a brand standard guide for your company, how to look and have a unified feel, I'm happy to share those resources with you. Just come in my inbox and give me a shout. So now that we know how to express it, we have to build awareness, right? So this is when we're starting to communicate the brand both internally to our organization and externally to our potential customers and services. And this is when the advertising, the marketing plan comes in place. And the last point is you have to measure the brand, right? What is the brand equity? And you build brand equity by, how many potential customers you have, how many investors you have that have acquired equity of the brand. How good of a job have you done in building that brand awareness so that if anyone was to buy your business, it would be very easy for them to continue that and grow that exponentially. So those are the 5 core steps of the branding process. I've explained on this video also why a brand is important. So basically it builds loyalty, increases the value of the company, allows higher prices, you build market share, and basically it's also easy to launch new products. So I hope that in this video I have enlightened you in terms of why it's important to build a brand. And you really have to think if you're going to become friends with someone, if you're going to do business with someone, typically you're going to pick someone you like, know, and trust, right? That's what people like to do business with. And it's the same thing as a brand. You have to think of a brand as a personality, right? And a personality that you want to do business with, it's a brand that like, and trust, and they can stick to their promise and their commitment, and they're committed in delivering that value, not only consistently, but also in a way that goes above and beyond the marketplace in terms of what already exists. So, hey guys, if you found this valuable, feel free to share this with your organization. If you want to learn more about, how to build a brand foundation, I do have some resources. Just comment down below resources, or shoot me a message if you're too shy. And I'm happy to basically help you start this the right way. Because, if you build a business and you go straight to sales and marketing, you only have one chance to make a positive impression. And if you want to be in the long haul, you got to do this right. It's always branding, marketing, and then sales. So I hope that has enlightened you. It's been a pleasure to deliver some value to you today. And we'll tune in next time for some more business branding, marketing, and sales tips. Ciao for now.